Welcome to Book Talk with Corbin. I am your host. I usually do not get into daily news events. I'm not equipped to do that, and most podcasts really don't do that. What we try to do is sort of get people thinking about the bigger issues, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm wanting my listeners to look at the bigger issue, and so let me get more specific on what I'm talking about. As you know, or may not know, the Georgia legislature recently passed a bill on voting that some people, including Delta Airlines and Major League Baseball, has described as racist. And even the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has gone as far as to say the law is representative of a return to Jim Crow. And I've heard other people describe the bill as, Jim Crow on steroids. And that's all fine and good. Let me repeat, that's all fine and good. I'm not saying the right, I'm not saying the wrong. But here is what I am saying. Let me just step back for a minute. I teach Hamlet. I taught Hamlet to my daughter, used a workbook, taught her Hamlet. And then I also I've taught a couple other students Hamlet. I had to use a particular workbook. Then I teach them from the workbook. We do the workbook. We discuss the chapters. And then I'll go to YouTube and I'll find a play that's been recorded, and we'll watch the play. And here's the way I do it. I'll ask a student questions. See, I don't engage in indoctrination. I don't sit there and tell a student what to think. I strive to teach them how to think. So, if you're looking to get like a Pan-African Studies degree, you don't want to come to me. You probably want to go to University of Louisville, because what you'll receive there is indoctrination. You're not going to receive anything in the way of developing critical thinking skills. Now, let me try to better explain what I mean by that. When I'm teaching my students about Hamlet, I always say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And they may say, well, Coach, I think Hamlet's crazy. Really? Why do you say that? And tell me. And then I will maybe ask some other probing questions. I never let them get away with, well, he's crazy. He's a nut job. Well, why do you say that? I don't know. He's just crazy. He's a nut job. Well, go to the text and show me why you say what you say. I'm not saying that your opinion is right or it's wrong. I'm just simply saying, go to the text and show me why you think the way you think. Why, what in the text are you basing that opinion on? And I emphasize to them, I'm not saying you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying go to the text. And then show me something in the text that gives your opinion some sort of basis. Years ago I taught to a student Up from Slavery. No, I take that back. It was Frederick Douglass' autobiography. I taught her that. And she would express some opinions. And I said, okay, where in the text do you base that on? I'm not saying you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong. Where do you base that on? And I remember one time I asked her the question, well, when did Frederick Douglass gain his emancipation? And she said, when he ran away. I said, okay. Where did he run to? All right. And I said, well, go to the text and show me where he talks about he ran away. Did he say at that time he was free? And she'd go back to the text and said, well, no, not really. I said, okay. And then she said, well, what about the 1863 Emancipation Proclamation? I said, well, go to the text. Go to the book and show me, is that the time he said he was free? And she said, no, not really. And I said to her, I said, look, this is where I believe he said he became a free man. And I took her to the text, and she read it. And she said, well, I have to agree with you. See, I gave my opinion, but I based my opinion on what was written in the text. And she read it, and she said, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to agree with you on that." Folks, these people are engaged in indoctrination. They are not engaged in critical thinking. If you think, the Georgia state legislature passed this Jim Crow voting law, suppressing the black vote and that kind of stuff, wow, that's a pretty serious accusation. I would want to see that, even though I don't live in Georgia, and I have no intentions of ever living in Georgia or doing business in Georgia. But that's pretty serious. I tell you what, read the text, read the bill, and then show me in the bill, highlight it, read it to me, where it suppresses voting. Show me the bill that it's comparable to the horrific Jim Crow law. Show me. Show me in the text. Where's it at? I don't want to hear no nonsense about dog whistles. I don't want to hear no nonsense about, well, how they do. It's more subtle. You know how they do. No, I want you to go to the text. Read the bill. And then go to the text and say, hey, okay, this is here, right here, is where it's clearly talking about suppressing votes, or it's on this context, on here, what is written in this bill at this point, that I believe it would lead to the suppression of the vote, and it gives rise to those horrific Jim Crow laws. Show that to me. I have no problem. But show it to me. Don't tell me what to think. Teach me how to think. That's the way I do my students. I don't tell them what to think. I teach them how to think. And let me tell you something. The CEO of Coca-Cola and this airline and these guys at the Major League Baseball, I have no faith whatsoever in their critical thinking skills. I have no respect for their critical thinking skills whatsoever. I would never allow them to come into my classroom, quote unquote classroom, to teach my students. I wouldn't do it, because they're not teaching. They're not engaged in teaching. They're engaged in indoctrination. Period. They're engaged in indoctrination. I remember one time I had a student. She said something, and I said, I asked her a question. I said, "Have you ever read the U.S. Constitution?" She said, "No." I said, "But here you are making a comment, a very serious comment about the U.S. Constitution. You never read it?" She said, "Well, no." And she started making excuses, said, "No. If you got a problem with the U.S. Constitution, I think your first obligation is to read the thing. Then after you've read it, then you can point to the U.S. Constitution and say, well, this is wrong and this is wrong and that kind of stuff. Then we can have a rational discussion. Then we can have a rational discussion. Then we can have a rational discussion." I need to repeat that. But until you've read the U.S. Constitution, it's ridiculous for you to criticize the U.S. Constitution and the system of government we have in the United States of America. I'm saying, and I emphasize to her, I'm not saying what you said about the United States system of government is right or wrong, but our system of government is based on the U.S. Constitution. And you're telling me you haven't read it? You haven't read it? No, read it and then go, and based on what you read in the text, you let me know, you express your opinion. Then we can have a rational discussion. I've had students who one time said to me, well, Shakespeare's racist, and, he's an ignorant white man. He's got nothing to say to me. I said, oh, okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting opinion. And people, I literally say those kind of things to them. I don't get upset. I don't start yelling or anything like that. I said, fine, well, what of the plays of Shakespeare have you ever read? Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, King Lear, Othello. Have you read these things? Any of them, any play. And I'm telling you, 99.99% of the, well, no, I take that back. I don't want to exaggerate. 100% of the time, they will tell me, well, no. I said, oh, okay. So you've never read Shakespeare. And you probably haven't not only not read Shakespeare, you probably haven't even done any research on Shakespeare the individual. And yet you're expressing an opinion on what? Let me tell you something. And I say this to him. You know what? I'm not going to give you no bunny degree here. Those, that kind of thinking, you can either go to certain places, some colleges, universities here around the country, and go into certain departments, and they'll give you a bunny degree because they're all about indoctrinating you. They're not about engaging you and helping you to develop your critical thinking skills. With me, you're going to read Shakespeare, and you're going to learn about Shakespeare. And then after you've read the one of his plays, my favorite is Hamlet, and after you read some things about Shakespeare, then if you want to say, oh, he's a racist, he's no good, that's fine with me. But the only thing I'm going to do is say, go back to the text. Show me, based on what? Where are you reaching that sort of conclusion? Based on what? How are you reaching that conclusion? I'm not saying you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying we're going to read him. We're going to read Hamlet. We're going to learn about Shakespeare. And then at the end, if you say, oh, Hamlet's racist and all this other stuff, fine. Just take me to where in the play where in Hamlet, show me the text where you think it's all racist and that kind of stuff. Be a different matter if, maybe if the Merchant of Venice or Othello, but they haven't even read these things. And they're just coming off with these opinions. Opinions based on what? Based on emotionalism. Folks, let me tell you something. Some of these people criticize rational thinking. They criticize critical thinking. There's a reason why they do that. They don't want you to... They hate that. They emphasize emotionalism. I've even had some people... I've read this. I heard some black museum put out a statement that you're acting, quote unquote, too white, or you're being a white supremacist if you emphasize rationalism when discussing an issue. Think about that. Facts don't matter. They disregard facts. And then they'll go as far as to say a person who wants to base their opinion on some facts, on reason, oh, you're a racist. I had one guy on my Facebook page say Donald Trump said this whole COVID stuff, or the coronavirus or the Chinese virus, was a hoax. And I said, wow, that's a pretty serious charge. When did he say that? Give me a reliable source. When did he say that? He's president of the United States. Most everything he ever said in those 4 years he was president was recorded. So, send me a recording. I don't have a problem with it. Then we can have a rational discussion. Folks, to this day, he hasn't responded. To this day, he hasn't responded. They just throw things out there and say whatever. We cannot have our young people think that way. Again, this is not about conservative and liberal. This is not about Democrat and Republican. This is about teaching our young people how to engage in, how to help young people develop their critical thinking skills. You just can't run up there and say, oh, you're a racist. Well, you saying so does not make it so. I'm sorry. What has this person said or done for you to reach that kind of conclusion? And once you've cited that, then we can have a rational discussion. Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I enjoy my time with you, and you will be hearing from me again.